Okay, Tom Kitt, you were the musical director of Grease Live. You also composed two songs for the show. Did you feel at all nervous about taking one of the most beloved properties of the last 40 years and adapting it to live television?
Well, yes, of course. Grease is iconic. Grease is beloved. Certainly, I have been influenced by it. It was something I experienced many times as a kid, going to the movies, and then I was a musical director in my high school production, and to see just how many people revere it. So there was that aspect, doing right by the material, and then also for me this great unknown of a live television event that I had never worked on in this capacity. So there were a lot of unknowns, but I had just the most wonderful creative team to work with, led by, of course, Mark Platt and Tommy Kail and Alex and everybody at Paramount and Fox. And so I felt very taken care of, certainly, but I knew that I was going to have to bring a lot of creativity to the project as well.
Well, take us through it, because I was just watching it earlier before the interview. And I think a lot of people might not realize the kind of work and rehearsal that goes into putting up a live program. So take us through the process.
Well, certainly, I knew that this was going to be a brand new version of Grease. So really, I had to create a new score from the ground up. So that meant finding all the different versions of the score that exist, because there are certain songs that were just used in the movie and not in the original Broadway production. So I had to track all those down, and then I had to also rejigger them to an extent based on what we were doing. Take a song like Those Magic Changes, for example. Our version in the live telecast was a brand new version. We incorporated story in a different way. The lyric was going to be broken up in different ways to serve the story in that moment. So really, there was that aspect that had to happen even before rehearsal began. I had to basically create a new piano vocal score for the entire cast to learn from. Once that was created, then I had to work with Tommy, incorporating new underscore moments, the new songs, obviously. So the whole score now had to be morphed and changed based on what we were doing in rehearsal. And once that got finalized, then I had to go off and orchestrate all of the songs. And certainly there were orchestrations that we used that were from the film, but there were brand new orchestrations that I had to do from the ground up for my song, certainly for new underscoring, but also something like Those Magic Changes, which was a different version, or even Fred and My Love, which we incorporated a big brassy sound to evoke the kind of USO tonality in that moment. Grease is the Word was something, again, I harken back to what was originally there, but I also updated to serve Jessie J. So there was a lot of new orchestration, arrangement that I had to bring to the table, that stood side by side with some of the things that had existed already.
Mm-hmm. Talk about those original songs that you composed. Where did the ideas for them come from?
Well, certainly for All I Need Is an Angel, which was a new song we wrote for Frenchie, that feels like a quintessential musical theater moment. She's at a moment of doubt in her life. She's wishing for someone to come and guide her. And so it felt like a song moment. And certainly when you have someone like Carly Rae Jepsen in your cast, and you notice that Frenchie doesn't have any solo material, it also seemed like an opportunity to create something for her. So it really was both, something for Carly Rae, but also it didn't feel like we were shoehorning a moment into the score. It did feel like an earned musical moment. And then for Maybe Baby, there was an opportunity as we were figuring out the puzzle of the dance and what songs you were going to use that had been part of that sequence already, like Rock and Roll's Here to Stay, But then in this slot, there was the opportunity to create a new song, and so for Brian Yorkie and myself, it was a really fun moment to say, okay, if we're going to write a 1950s Elvis Presley kind of song, what road would we go down? So that was a lot of fun to create as well.
Mm-hmm. So take us to the day of the performance. I live out here in California by the Warner Brothers lot, and I remember all of the preparation and hoopla around it. What's the performance day like? Take us there.
Well, for me, everything was about preparing for that day, because the way the show was going to be performed, it was going to be performed in a number of different sound stages, and it's not like Broadway where you have a monitor or the conductor is standing. I knew that the actors were pretty much going to be on their own once the show was up and running. So what I had to do with my wonderful music team is basically map out the entire show in a way that everything would be rehearsed in a controlled yet creative way, and that the actors just felt like they knew what the motor was. So that when we got to the day, there would be no questions. And that was going to be tricky in some instances because there was some cueing. But basically, for a song like, again, Those Magic Changes, where we're going in and out of dialogue and singing, I had to map that out in the exact amount of music so that it would time perfectly for when the dialogue was done and we would go back into singing. For a song like There Are Worse Things I Could Do, which begins somewhat out of time and needs to feel like Vanessa is really singing that in the moment in the way she wants. I basically took what she was doing in rehearsal and mapped it out with a click map so that it would feel very much very much free for her. And we talked about that and collaborated on that. So really the day of, I'm kind of sitting back and watching and hoping that this thing that I worked on for weeks and prepared was going to go exactly the way I had planned. And I'm happy to say that it did. I'm relieved to say that it did as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it is a lot like, it's a lot like well, I mean, it is a live show. I was going to say it's a lot like a live show.
It is a live show.
Stating the obvious. What I mean to say is, for a lot of people, this is the closest that they can get to seeing a live Broadway show,
Yes.
And there's been a lot of these lately, and there's a lot more coming up. Why do you think the sudden popularity of live performances of these shows?
Well,
for television.
A musical, a Broadway musical is an event. It is for the people that experience it in the theater. And now what's happening is we're taking that and we're blowing it up and allowing the whole country to feel what you feel in a live Broadway house. But that being said, this is obviously a different genre. As I said, one aspect, conducting. There are many other aspects that that make this distinct. So what we really tried to do, everyone involved, was say, okay, if this is going to work on television, how are we going to now come at this with our Broadway know-how, but also put that aside and say we have to think outside of the box for this different kind of genre, the live television musical. So I think that at the end of the day, and I see it with my kids, they experience something in the moment. They watch it, it speaks to them, it feels exciting. We're delivering the experience of a Broadway musical, but we're allowing it to morph and change based on what the television experience also demands.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Broadway and television, you won a couple of Emmy Awards for your work on I think it was the 67th Tony Awards.
Yeah, I won. I would love to say I've won multiple, but I just won one. I won an Emmy for co-writing the opening number of the 2013 Emmy Awards. The 2013 Tony Awards with Lin-Manuel Miranda.
So what did that kind of recognition mean for you?
An Emmy Award is something that you dream of, that always seems like it's outside of your reality. So to suddenly be put into that category, and to be at an event and looking around the room with all these people that are your heroes and that you've admired, and to be suddenly in the same sentence with all these people, it means a great deal. And anyone who works in television knows it's a very demanding job. It takes a lot of you, your smartest ideas, your tireless work, and certainly again on Grease Live, this was a 2-year process for me in terms of thinking how this was going to go to come down to one day. So anything that you live and die with like that, you put all of your time and energy into, if you are lucky enough to get put into that category of an Emmy nomination, it really means the world.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's what's also great about this show too. It's for a lot of people, it's their introduction to Grease.
Yes.
You know, I mean, obviously there are people who grew up with it, but for a lot of people, this is their introduction to Grease. You know, can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. That was really exciting because we all could relate to that. Our introduction to Grease when we were kids was just mind-blowing, and there's a reason why we watch it over and over again. And again, just to point to my kids who hadn't experienced it, suddenly I saw in them what I felt when I was a kid. There's just something about the material that draws us all in. We really get emotional about these characters. We care about them. We are all just swept away by the dance sequence and how exciting that whole thing is. I can't stop listening to hand jive. It's just something that it really just bubbles inside of you. So there's just something about this material that we all just love, and I think it's been very exciting to see a new generation discover it and love it the way everybody else does.
Well, congratulations on your work and on there being such a great payoff for it. You're welcome, and it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you too. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.